The Emperor watches as we all bleed. I believed this once. Now I know he watches as we rust. My name was Meron of Clan Raukan, brother captain of the Iron Hands. I was a warrior, a leader of men who turned flesh to iron in service to mankind. Now I am neither flesh nor truly iron. I am memory housed in metal, a revenant caught between honor and horror. They tell the initiates that interment within a Dreadnought sarcophagus is our chapter's highest honor. The final reward for exceptional service. The chance to fight eternally in the Emperor's name. I believed this once, as they all do. Faith is strongest before the forge fire burns you. The last battle I remember with perfect clarity was on Tyrannus 7, a world of ash and cinder where the sky rained molten glass. Our company deployed against a warband of word-bearers who had raised 8 cathedrals of corruption upon the plains. Each cathedral housed a dark apostle preaching blasphemy that drove the local population to madness. I remember the drop pods slamming into the ashen earth, the ramp falling away to reveal a landscape flayed by artillery, the smell of cordite and burning promethium hanging thick in the atmosphere. I led the assault against the central cathedral, my power fist crackling with killing potential as word-bearers swarmed from their unholy sanctuary. There is something perverse about traitor Astartes. They retain all the transhuman strength and tactical acumen of loyal space marines, but direct it toward purposes that corrupt their very being. Fighting them feels like looking into a mirror crafted from nightmares. Every movement familiar yet wrong, every tactic recognizable yet twisted. They know how we think because they once thought as we did. The word-bearer who dealt me my mortal wound was called Marduk the Faithless. He carried an axe that screamed with the voices of all it had killed. When it bit into my side, slicing through ceramite and into my enhanced organs, I felt those voices surge into me. Millions of souls in torment attempting to claim mine. I killed him anyway, crushed his skull with my power fist and watched his corrupted brain matter splash across my armor. Even as my secondary heart failed and my enhanced biology struggled to compensate for catastrophic blood loss, I advanced into the cathedral. The mission parameters were clear. Destroy the source of corruption, purge the unclean. I remember placing melter charges at the structure's key junctures. I remember the satisfaction of watching it collapse as I fell to my knees, blood pooling beneath me. My brothers found me there, half buried in rubble, reciting the litany against weakness. The last words I spoke with my true voice. The flesh is weak, but my resolve is iron. Then darkness. A darkness I assumed was death. I was wrong. Death would have been clean. This was merely transition. I awoke to new awareness. At first, I could not understand what had happened. My vision was altered, enhanced in some ways, diminished in others. I could see with perfect clarity for several kilometers but could not turn my head to look to my sides without shifting my entire body. I could hear the voices of my brothers, but they seemed to come from very far away or through thick walls, no matter how close they stood. The sensation of my limbs was wrong. When I attempted to move my fingers, massive armored gauntlets responded instead. When I tried to feel my heartbeat, there was only the thrum of powerful engines. Most disturbing of all, I could not feel pain, nor hunger, nor exhaustion. I could not feel the reassuring discipline of my enhanced physiology working to keep me alive. It took time to understand fully what had occurred. I was no longer housed in the body the Emperor had seen fit to enhance through his divine technology. I was interred within the armored sarcophagus of a Dreadnought. My shattered mortal form was suspended in amniotic fluid, connected to the war machine through a network of neural interfaces and life support systems. Brother Captain Meron has been deemed worthy of continued service, said Tech Marine Audriel as he performed calibrations on my systems. You are reborn in iron, as the Primarch intended. A great honor. Honor. The word echoed strangely in my consciousness. At first I believed it truly was a blessing. A chance to continue serving the Emperor and my chapter. The Iron Hands value strength above all things, and what could be stronger than a warrior freed from the weakness of flesh? My new form was powerful beyond measure. Where once I carried a power fist and bolt pistol, I now wielded a massive power fist capable of crushing battle tanks and a heavy flamer that could purge entire squads of enemies in seconds. My first battle after interment was against Orc forces on Helios Minoris. I remember the exhilaration of striding through enemy fire that would have killed an Astartes in power armor. Rounds pinged harmlessly off my adamantium hull. Crude Orc explosives detonated against me with little effect. I waded into their green tide and broke them, crushing their warboss beneath my feet while my flamer reduced his bodyguards to ash. My brothers cheered. They banged their fists against their chest plates in salute to my victory. I felt pride then, purpose, but there were signs of what was to come, early warnings I failed to heed. After the battle, the other Astartes returned to the strike cruiser. They ate in the feasting hall, sharing tales of the day's glories. They trained in the practice cages, honing their skills further. They prayed in the ship's chapel, reaffirming their devotion to the Emperor and the Primarch. I did none of these things. I was taken to the hangar bay, where tech marines performed maintenance on my systems. They spoke about me rather than to me as they worked, discussing oil changes and weapon calibrations as if I were merely another piece of equipment. When the maintenance was complete, they activated my suspension protocols, and I entered a dreamless, timeless state that was neither sleep nor consciousness. This is the first truth of Dreadnought existence that no one tells the initiates. Between battles, we cease to be. It is not death, it is not sleep, it is non-existence. They power down our primary systems to preserve our organic components. Our consciousness is suspended, and time becomes meaningless. When they reactivate us for the next battle, it could be days later, or years, or centuries. I learned this truth slowly, piecing together fragments of overheard conversations, noticing subtle changes in chapter organization and equipment between awakenings, recognizing that I no longer knew the names of many who wore the insignia of my company. Who commands the 5th Company now? I asked a young tech marine during maintenance after a campaign against Dark Eldar raiders. "Brother Captain Vortigern," he replied without looking up from his work. "I do not know this name. What became of Brother Captain Severax?" The tech marine paused, confusion evident even through his expressionless faceplate. "Brother Captain Severax fell in glory during the purge of Manticore 200 years ago. His gene seed was recovered and has since produced 17 new battle brothers. 200 years. The words struck me like physical blows. 2 centuries had passed without my knowledge. 200 years of chapter history, of campaigns and battles, of victories and defeats. 200 years during which the brother who had succeeded me had lived, fought, and died, and I had experienced none of it. This is the second truth of Dreadnought existence. We become disconnected from the flow of time. For my brothers, time moves in a linear progression. For me, it moves in violent bursts, separated by nothingness. I experience only war, only moments when my skills at dealing death are required. All else, all moments of peace, of reflection, of brotherhood, are denied me. They say it is to facto, preserve the organic components that still exist within the sarcophagus. That constant awareness would drive us mad. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps this fractured perception is a mercy, but it feels like a cage. After battle on a world whose name I never learned, where we purged heretics who had taken over a planetary defense system, I was being prepared for suspension when I asked the attending tech marine a question. "Brother, how long has it been since I was interred in this sarcophagus?" He consulted a data slate. "According to chapter records, you have served as a dreadnought for 473 standard years. Nearly 5 centuries. 5 centuries of war without respite. 5 centuries during which everyone I had known in my previous life had likely died. 5 centuries during which I had experienced perhaps a total of months of consciousness." "And how long," I asked, my artificial voice betraying no emotion, "do dreadnoughts typically serve?" The tech marine's response chilled whatever remained of my soul. "The oldest dreadnought in service to the Adeptus Astartes is Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves. He has been fighting for over 10,000 years, since the time of the Horus heresy itself. 10,000 years. An eternity spent as a weapon to be used and stored away. An eternity without true brotherhood, without purpose beyond killing. An eternity trapped in a metal shell with only fragments of memory to remind you that you were once human. As the suspension protocols engaged, I tried to cry out, to protest, to beg for true death instead of this half-life. But the systems were already shutting down, my consciousness already fading. My next awakening came during what I would later learn was the Damocles Gulf Crusade. We faced the Tau, a xeno species unknown to me, wielding technology that seemed impossible. Energy weapons that sliced through ceramite like parchment. Battlesuits that moved with fluid grace despite their size. Tactics that confounded even veteran Astartes. I fought alongside iron hands I did not know, led by officers whose names meant nothing to me. When they addressed me, it was as Ancient One or simply Venerable Dreadnought, not as Meron, never as Meron. That name belonged to a space marine who had died on Tyrannus 7th, not to the war machine that had replaced him. During that campaign, I encountered another Dreadnought from a different chapter, a blood angel whose red hull was adorned with golden scrollwork. Between battles, when the Tech Marines were distracted with more pressing repairs, we spoke. "How long have you served, brother?" I asked. "I was interred after the Battle of Makan," he replied, his voice a mechanical approximation of what it once had been. 1,947 years ago. "And you?" "Nearly 5 centuries, I am told." The Blood Angel's vox emitter produced a sound that might have been a laugh. "Still fresh, then? Still remembering your flesh life clearly?" "Yes. Does that fade?" "Everything fades, Iron Hand. Except duty, except war. We fight because it is all that remains to us. We fight because without war, we have no purpose. We fight because in those moments of battle, we can almost remember what it meant to be alive." His words haunted me through that campaign. Through the battles against the Tau fire warriors and their deadly battlesuits. Through the destruction of their orbital installations and the purging of their Earthcast research facilities. They haunted me as I was once again prepared for suspension, knowing that when I next awoke, it might be centuries later, to fight an enemy I had never heard of, alongside brothers who knew me only as a relic of their chapters past. This is the third truth of Dreadnought existence. We are not truly brothers anymore. We are weapons. We are relics. We are history given form and purpose, but we are not part of the Brotherhood in the way we once were. The suspension protocol activated, and I slipped away into nothingness once more. I do not know how long I was suspended. When awareness returned, I found myself in a different war, on a different world, facing a different enemy. This time it was Tyranids, a Xenos threat of incomprehensible scale and horror. Living weapons engineered for perfect killing efficiency, directed by a hive mind of terrifying intelligence. I was deployed alongside 3 companies of Iron Hands to defend a Mechanicus Forge world. The sky was filled with spores and the ground crawled with chitin-armored monstrosities. We established a defensive perimeter around the Forge's primary reactor, determined to deny the Xenos its power source, even if it meant destroying it ourselves. The battle lasted weeks. Continuous combat with only brief pauses for essential maintenance. Even in those moments, I was not suspended. The threat was too great, the need for all weapons too pressing. This extended period of awareness was unusual, and it allowed me to observe my chapter in ways normally denied to me. What I saw troubled me deeply. The Iron Hands had always embraced augmetics, always sought to eliminate the weakness of flesh in emulation of our Primarch Ferrus Manus. But the brothers I fought alongside now had taken this philosophy to extremes I did not recognize. Many had replaced not just damaged limbs but perfectly functional ones with bionics. Some had augmented their brains with cogitator interfaces that allowed them to process tactical data with machine efficiency. They fought not with the controlled fury I remembered, but with cold, mechanical precision. Their battle cant contained none of the warrior poetry that had once bound us together. Instead, they communicated in clipped binary bursts optimized for information transfer. During one rare moment of respite, I addressed the current captain of the 5th Company, a warrior named Cardan whose face was more metal than flesh. "Brother Captain, I have served the chapter for many centuries, but I do not recognize what we have become. Where is the warrior brotherhood I once knew? Where is the humanity we fight to defend?" Cardan regarded me with eyes that had been replaced by augmetic lenses. "Ancient One, you speak of outdated concepts. The chapter evolves as it must. Humanity is weak. We defend the Imperium not out of brotherhood with its citizens, but because it is the logical course of action. The flesh fails. Only iron endures." His words were technically consistent with chapter teachings, yet they felt hollow, empty of the purpose that had once driven us. We had always believed the flesh was weak, but we had enhanced ourselves to better serve humanity, not to abandon it entirely. I wondered then if this was why the oldest dreadnoughts were awakened so rarely, not just to preserve our systems, but because we remembered a different chapter, because we might question what our brothers had become. The Tyranid assault intensified. Wave after wave of monstrosities broke against our lines. I fought without rest, my weapons systems operating well beyond recommended tolerances. Alongside me, my Iron Hand brothers fought with machine precision, unmoved by the horrors we faced, untroubled by the losses we sustained. During the final push, when the Tyranid Hive Tyrant led its largest beasts in a desperate assault on the reactor, I found myself fighting alongside Cardan. His power axe cut through chitin with mechanical efficiency, while his plasma pistol overheated repeatedly in his hand, burning away the few remaining patches of flesh on his arm. A Carnifex charged our position, its massive scything talons cutting down 3 battle brothers in a single sweep. I moved to intercept, my power fist connecting with its armored head. The creature staggered but did not fall. Its tail whipped around, smashing into my armored hull with enough force to damage several external systems. Warnings flashed across my vision, hydraulic pressure dropping in my left side, weapon systems operating at reduced capacity, but I pressed the attack, driving my fist into the creature's torso, rupturing its internal organs. As it collapsed, its death throes damaged me further. I fell to one knee, systems failing. Cardan approached, assessing my condition with a dispassionate gaze. "Your sarcophagus has sustained critical damage," he stated flatly. "Probability of successful field repair is below acceptable parameters." "Then help me up, brother," I replied. "Let me die fighting as a warrior should." "Inefficient. You will be recovered and repaired when the battle permits. Until then, emergency suspension protocols will be initiated." Before I could protest, he accessed an external control panel on my damaged hull. The familiar, dreaded sensation of systems shutting down, of consciousness receding, overtook me. But this time, perhaps due to the damage I had sustained, the suspension was imperfect. I did not lose consciousness entirely. Instead, I entered a state of half-awareness, unable to move or speak, but still perceiving shadows of what occurred around me. I felt myself being transported, heard distant, muffled voices discussing my condition, experienced the sensation of time passing without being fully present for it. This half-sleep was worse than the complete oblivion of proper suspension. Fragments of memory surfaced and submerged. Moments from my flesh life mixed with centuries of war. The faces of battle brothers long dead appeared before me, their features shifting between the ones I had known and the mechanical approximations my damaged systems could render. I do not know how long I remained in this state. Time had long since lost meaning for me. But eventually, full awareness returned. I found myself in a repair bay unlike any I had seen before. The iconography was still that of the Iron Hands, but the technology was unfamiliar, more advanced in some ways, more crude in others. A tech marine stood before me, his armor so heavily augmented that little of the original ceramite remained visible. Where his right hand should have been, mechadendrites writhed like mechanical serpents. Sarcophagus systems restored to acceptable parameters, he said, addressing me directly for the first time since my awakening. Cognitive function shows anomalous patterns but remains within operational tolerance. Where am I? I asked. How long was I in suspension? You are aboard the strike cruiser Wrath of Medusa. You were recovered from Forge World Lucius II after the completion of the campaign. That was 327 years ago. Over 3 centuries in that half-aware state. The knowledge should have horrified me, but I felt only a dull resignation. Time had become meaningless. 3 centuries or 3 days, what difference did it make to one such as I? Why was I reactivated? I asked instead. We face a significant chaos incursion in the Canathian sector. All chapter resources are being deployed, including venerable assets such as yourself. Venerable assets. Not brothers, not warriors, assets. What is your designation, Techmarine? I am Ordinator Vex of the Iron Hands Techmarine Division. No, I said. What is your name? The one you were born with, before you came to the chapter. The Techmarine was silent for a moment, the mechadendrites on his arm writhing more rapidly. That information is irrelevant. The flesh is weak. I have ascended beyond such limitations. Is that what we have become, then? Machines who merely remember being human. We have become stronger, more efficient. The Primarch would approve. Would he? I wondered. Ferrus Manus had embraced augmentation, but he had remained fundamentally human in his outlook. He had valued strength, but also brotherhood, loyalty, and the bonds between warriors. Would he recognize what his sons had become? I had no time to pursue this line of thought. Battle preparations were underway. I was equipped with freshly, blessed ammunition, my systems checked one final time, and then I was loaded into a massive drop pod alongside 2 other dreadnoughts. I did not recognize my companions. One bore the markings of the first company, his sarcophagus decorated with honors from campaigns I had never heard of. The other was newer, his armored shell still relatively unmarked. Brothers, I said over the tactical vox as the drop pod plummeted toward the embattled world below. I am Meron of Clan Raukan, formerly captain of the 5th Company. I am Thanatar, replied the 1st Company dreadnought, once of Clan Avernii. The newer dreadnought remained silent for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was hesitant, as if unused to communication. They call me Venerable Brother Kratax now. I remember being Sergeant Kratax once, 300 years ago. Or was it 400? The archives say I was interred after the battle on Sheol. Do you remember your life before? I asked. Do you remember being flesh and blood? Sometimes, Kratax replied. In moments between battles. Fragments. A remembrancer once told me I had a brother who also served the chapter. I do not recall his name or face. Thanatar's vox emitter produced a static-laden sigh. The memories fade, brothers. All except war. War remains when all else is lost to time. The drop pod slammed into the planet's surface with bone-jarring force. The assault ramp dropped, revealing a landscape of nightmare. A once prosperous imperial city transformed by the corrupting influence of chaos. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes. Streets flowing with substances that were neither liquid nor solid. The sky above torn open to reveal the swirling madness of the warp. We advanced into this hellscape, our heavy weapons bringing death to the corrupted cultists who swarmed from distorted buildings. Behind us came tactical squads of Iron Hands, their movements precisely coordinated, their augmetic enhancements gleaming in the unnatural light. The enemy we faced was a warband of the Alpha Legion, supported by daemons they had summoned through blasphemous rituals. They fought with the cunning that had always characterized their traitor legion, using the corrupted civilian population as shields and distractions, while their true forces maneuvered for advantage. I recognized their tactics. The Alpha Legion had not changed in the centuries since I had last fought them. There was something almost comforting in their consistency when so much else had become unrecognizable. The battle flowed through the twisted city, each block taken at great cost. The iron hands advanced with methodical precision, unmoved by the horrors arrayed against them. I provided heavy support, my weapons cutting down enemy after enemy. During a momentary lull in the fighting, as the tactical squads reloaded and prepared to advance into a corrupted cathedral, I noticed a small group of civilians huddled in the ruins of what had once been a hab block. They were untainted by chaos, somehow having survived the warband's arrival. Among them was a child, no more than 6 years old, clutching a ragged stuffed animal. The child looked up at me with wide, fearful eyes. To him, I must have appeared as monstrous as the enemy we fought. A massive war machine bristling with weapons, bearing the skull and cog iconography of the Iron Hands. Something stirred within whatever remained of my soul, a memory of what it meant to be human, of what we fought to protect. "Be not afraid," I said, my vox emitter lowered to its softest setting. "The Emperor protects." The child continued to stare, neither fleeing nor approaching. One of the Iron Hands' tactical marines noticed my attention shift. "Venerable One," he said, "these civilians are an inefficiency. They should be eliminated to deny the enemy potential assets." I turned my massive form to face him, weapon systems deliberately pointed away. "They are not assets, brother. They are the Imperium we have sworn to defend, the humanity we have sacrificed our own to preserve. The mission parameters prioritize elimination of the Alpha Legion presence. These civilians present a tactical vulnerability. Then secure them and continue the advance. We do not kill those we are sworn to protect." The Marine's augmetic eyes whirred as they focused on me. "Your logic is flawed, Ancient One. Perhaps your cognitive systems require recalibration." Before I could respond, Thanatar's massive form stepped between us. "The Venerable Brother's wisdom spans centuries, young one. You would do well to heed it, secure the civilians, and continue the mission." Surprisingly, the Marine complied, signaling 2 of his squad to escort the civilians to a designated safe zone. As they moved away, the child looked back at me once more. This time, there was something besides fear in those eyes, perhaps gratitude, perhaps hope. The battle resumed its bloody course. We pushed toward the heart of the corruption, a massive temple the Alpha Legion had raised to their dark gods. The architecture defied logic, angles that should have been impossible, surfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with unholy life. At its center stood a traitor Astartes, unlike the others. Where his brothers wore the Hydra-marked armor of the Alpha Legion, his ceramite was a riot of colors that shifted and changed as I watched. Psychic energy crackled around him, and reality itself seemed to warp in his presence. "A sorcerer," voxed Thanatar. "A significant threat." The sorcerer raised his staff, unleashing a wave of warp energy that caught one of the Iron Hands' tactical squads. Their armor provided no protection against this attack. I watched in horror as they twisted and changed, their flesh and metal melding and transforming until they were no longer recognizable as either human or machine. I advanced, my heavy flamer spewing promethium in a cleansing arc. The transformed Marines were consumed in holy fire, their suffering ended. The sorcerer turned his attention to me, his face twisted in a smile that contained too many teeth. "Ancient One," he said, his voice somehow cutting through the din of battle to reach me with perfect clarity. "How long has it been since you truly lived? Since you felt the beat of your heart, the breath in your lungs, the touch of another human being?" His words struck with more force than any physical blow. He raised his hand, and suddenly I was experiencing sensations I had not felt in centuries. The weight of a real body, the taste of food and drink, the embrace of battle brothers after victory, the simple pleasure of removing armor after a long campaign. "I can give this back to you," the sorcerer promised. "I can free you from your metal prison. All that is required is your service." For a moment, a fraction of a second, I hesitated. The sensations were so real, so achingly familiar. The memories of being truly alive rather than merely existing. Then I saw the corrupted Marines, their forms twisted beyond recognition, and I remembered the truth. Chaos offered nothing but lies and damnation. It could not restore what was lost. It could only corrupt what remained. "I serve the Emperor," I replied, advancing through the psychic assault. "In life and in death." I fired my weapons, but the sorcerer deflected the shots with a gesture. His power was formidable, fueled by the sacrifices the Alpha Legion had conducted in this corrupted city. Thanatar and Kratax joined me, the three of us forming a wedge of adamantium and ceramite. The sorcerer's attacks intensified, reality warping around us. Systems failed and reactivated. Warning runes flashed across my vision. Then, at a critical moment, Kratax faltered. His movements became erratic, his weapon systems firing wildly. Over the vox, I heard him cry out in a voice that was suddenly young, suddenly human again. "Brother Tool, I remember you now." The sorcerer laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Yes, remember. Remember what you have lost. Remember what you can never regain." Kratax's systems went haywire. His flamer discharged into the air, his close combat weapon scraped uselessly against the ground. He was lost in memories, overwhelmed by the sorcerer's psychic assault. I did the only thing I could. I positioned myself between Kratax and the sorcerer, absorbing the psychic attacks meant for my brother. Pain lanced through what remained of my organic components. False sensations of flesh being flayed from bone, of blood boiling in veins, of organs rupturing. But I advanced, one step at a time. Thanatar circled to the right, drawing some of the sorcerer's attention. The remaining Iron Hands tactical squads provided covering fire, their bolters cutting down Alpha Legion Marines who attempted to interfere. When I reached the sorcerer, his expression changed from confidence to concern. My power fist, crackling with disruptive energy, swung toward him. He raised a psychic barrier, but the power of my blow shattered it. My second strike caught him in the chest, crushing ceramite and flesh alike. As he died, his psychic assault faded, reality reasserting itself. The corrupted temple began to collapse, the impossible architecture no longer sustained by warp energies. "Fall back," I ordered over the vox. "The structure is failing." The Iron Hands withdrew in good order, dragging their wounded with them. I moved to Kratax, who had regained control of his systems but was moving slowly, like one in a daze. "Brother," I said, "we must withdraw." "I remembered," he replied, his voice distant. For a moment, I remembered everything. My life before the chapter, my brother who died during implantation, the campaigns we fought, the brothers we lost. It was all there, perfect and complete. And now? Fading, like waking from a dream, slipping away despite my attempts to hold it. Together, we made our way out of the collapsing temple. Debris crashed around us, but our armored forms withstood the impacts. Outside, the Iron Hands were already establishing a secure perimeter, preparing for possible counterattacks. The battle for this corrupted city would continue, but the heart of the Alpha Legion presence had been destroyed. The mission, at least by the cold calculations of my chapter, had been a success. As Tech Marines approached to perform battlefield repairs and prepare us for the next phase of the campaign, I looked to Kratax. "The memories may fade, brother, but duty remains. Service remains." "Is it enough?" he asked. "Is duty alone enough reason to endure this half-existence?" I had no answer that would comfort him, no wisdom gained from my centuries of service that could make the horror of our condition bearable. So I offered him the only truth I had found. "It must be. It is all we have left." The campaign continued for weeks more. We purged the Alpha Legion presence street by street, hab block by hab block. When it was finally complete, when the last corrupted building had been cleansed with holy fire, we were returned to the strike cruiser. As the Tech Marines prepared us for suspension once more, I made a request that surprised even me. "Before you activate the suspension protocols, I wish to address the chapter's assembled brothers." The tech marine paused in his work. For what purpose, Venerable One? To share wisdom gained through centuries of service. A partial truth, but enough to make him consult with his superiors. Permission was granted. I was brought to the ship's great assembly hall, where the surviving Iron Hands from the campaign had gathered. They stood in perfect formations, their augmetic enhancements gleaming under the harsh lumens. So different from the brothers I had once led, yet still bound to me by shared gene seed and purpose. Brothers of the Iron Hands, I began, my vox emitter projecting my voice across the vast chamber. I have served the chapter for over a millennium. I have witnessed the preempted eons and speakle, long war against chaos in all its forms. I have seen the enemies of mankind come and go while we endure. They listened in respectful silence, these warriors who knew me only as a living relic, a weapon from their chapter's storied past. You are taught that the flesh is weak, that emotion is a vulnerability to be excised like a cancerous growth, that logic and cold efficiency are the ideals to which you should aspire. I paused, aware that what I would say next bordered on heresy by the chapter's modern standards, yet it needed to be said. But remember this truth, which I have learned through countless battles across the span of centuries. We fight for humanity, not just for its survival, but for what makes it human, for its capacity to hope, to love, to sacrifice for others. If we abandon these things in ourselves, if we become nothing but machines of war, then we have already lost the most important battle. Silence greeted my words. The assembled Marines stood motionless, their augmetic eyes fixed upon my massive form. Then, slowly, one of them stepped forward. It was the tactical Marine who had wanted to eliminate the civilians during our advance through the corrupted city. "Venerable One," he said, "your wisdom is noted, but the chapter has evolved since your time. We have found that emotion clouds judgment, that human connections create vulnerabilities our enemies can exploit. The Primarch himself sought to overcome the weaknesses of flesh." "The Primarch," I replied, "retained his humanity until the end. He augmented his body to better serve mankind, not to reject it entirely. Remember that Ferrus Manus stood with his brother Primarchs, fought alongside human armies, and died defending the future of humanity." Before the Marine could respond, the ship's admiral entered the chamber, his uniform crisp, his face a study in controlled displeasure. "This philosophical debate must conclude," he announced. "We have received an astropathic message. The Tyrannid, splinter fleet we believe destroyed 3 centuries ago, has reappeared in the Gallian Nebula. All assets are being redeployed immediately." And just like that, any impact my words might have had was lost in the preparations for the next war. The endless, eternal war that was the only constant in my fractured existence. As the Tech Marine reactivated my suspension protocols, I wondered if anything I had said would be remembered, if any of these Iron Hands would reflect on the nature of their humanity, or if my words would be dismissed as the malfunctioning logic of an ancient war machine. The darkness of suspension claimed me once more, the nothingness between battles that had become as familiar as war itself. I do not know how many more times I have been awakened since then, how many more campaigns I have fought. The battles blur together, enemies and allies changing while the fundamental nature of war remains constant. Tyrannids, orcs, chaos, Tau, Dark Eldar, names and faces of enemies who exist for a flickering moment in my fractured perception of time before joining the numberless dead I have created across the millennia. The chapter itself changes between my awakenings. Doctrines evolve, equipment is modified, but the Iron Hands remain recognizable in their devotion to strength through technology, their contempt for the weakness of flesh, their methodical prosecution of war. Sometimes I see glimmers of the brotherhood I once knew, small moments of humanity that survive despite the chapter's best efforts to excise them. A battle brother risking himself to recover the body of a fallen comrade, a squad pausing to honor the sacrifice of mortal guardsmen who died alongside them. These moments give me hope that not all is lost, that beneath the augmetics and cold logic, something human endures. During one awakening, I found the chapter engaged against the Necrons, ancient Xenos whose living metal bodies and reality-defying technology made them formidable opponents. As I fought alongside a squad of Primaris Marines, a newer breed of Astartes, I was still struggling to understand. I was struck by a disturbing thought. Were we not becoming more like these soulless automatons with each passing century? Each augmentation, each replacement of flesh with metal, brought us closer to the enemy we were fighting. The irony was as bitter as it was obvious. After that campaign, as I was being prepared for suspension once more, I found myself under the ministrations of a tech marine who was different from most I had encountered in recent centuries. His name was Dagon, and though his body bore the expected augmentations of his role, his manner retained a warmth that had become increasingly rare. "Your combat performance was exemplary, Ancient One," he said as he carefully replaced a damaged hydraulic system in my left leg assembly. "But your suspension protocols show signs of degradation. Have you been experiencing any cognitive anomalies during your active periods? Define anomalies," I replied, curious about his assessment. "Unusual thought patterns, excessive reflection on philosophical matters, preoccupation with memory rather than present tactical situations." I would have laughed if my vox emitter had been capable of producing such a sound. "You describe not anomalies, but the natural condition of a being who remembers being human." Dagon paused in his work, looking up at my armored hull with an expression I could not fully interpret through my visual senses. "The chapter teaches that such reflections are inefficient, that they detract from combat effectiveness." "And what do you believe, Tech Marine Dagon?" He resumed his work, hands moving with practiced precision. "I believe that there is wisdom in the past that we abandon at our peril. The Omnissiah teaches that understanding comes through knowledge of what has been, what is, and what may be. A heretical view by current chapter standards. Perhaps, but one I am not alone in, holding." He completed his repairs and sealed the access panel on my leg. "There are those among us who study the old ways, who believe that in our drive to eliminate weakness, we may have discarded strengths as well. A dangerous position to take. All worthy positions carry risk, Ancient One." He moved to my weapon systems, beginning the ritualized maintenance that would prepare them for my next awakening. There are scrolls in the chapter archives, writings from the time of the Great Crusade. They speak of Ferrus Manus not as a cold logician, but as a passionate leader who inspired fierce loyalty. "I remember," I said, the words emerging before I could consider their wisdom. "I remember him standing before the assembled companies, his silver hands gleaming, his voice carrying to every warrior. He spoke of duty and honor, yes, but also of brotherhood, of the bonds that made us more than just warriors, of the humanity we fought to preserve, both in the Imperium and in ourselves." Dagon stopped his work entirely, staring up at me with undisguised awe. "You saw the Primarch? You heard him speak?" The question jolted me. Had I? The memory had surfaced with such clarity that I had spoken as if it were my own experience. But that was impossible. Ferrus Manus had died during the Horus Heresy, millennia before my birth. The memory could not be mine. "No," I said finally, "I could not have. It must be a data ghost. A memory fragment from another source that has somehow integrated with my own cognitive patterns. Or perhaps," Dagon suggested carefully, "it is something else. The chapter's oldest dreadnoughts sometimes experience what the librarians call temporal slippage. Moments when their consciousness connects with the memories of other warriors who occupied their sarcophagus before them." That is impossible. Each dreadnought houses a single warrior. That is what we are taught now. But there are records suggesting that in the earliest days, when resources were scarce and the need for warriors great, sarcophagi were sometimes reused. The original occupant given final death, their organic components removed, and a new wounded hero interred in their place. The implications were staggering. Could I be experiencing the memories of an Iron Hand who had actually served during the time of Ferrus Manus? A warrior whose name and deeds had been lost to time, but whose experiences somehow lingered in the ancient systems of the sarcophagus I now occupied. If what you suggest is true, then who am I? Am I Meron of Clan Raukan, or am I a composite being, my identity merged with those who came before? Perhaps it does not matter, Dagon replied. Perhaps what matters is that through you, something of those ancient days survives. A connection to a time when the chapter had not yet lost its way. Before I could respond, an alert klaxon sounded throughout the repair bay. Dagon looked up sharply, then began to rapidly complete his maintenance procedures. What happens? I asked. The fleet has translated back into real space. We face immediate engagement against wordbearer forces. All combat units are being prepared for deployment. The familiar rhythms of war resumed. My philosophical questions set aside once more in favor of the brutal calculus of battle, yet as I was loaded into a drop pod alongside Primaris intercessors, Dagon's words echoed in my thoughts. The idea that I might carry within me fragments of a more ancient consciousness was both disturbing and strangely comforting. It suggested a continuity, a connection to the chapter's origins that transcended my own fractured existence. The battle against the word-bearers was particularly savage. Their fanatical devotion to their dark gods made them fearless, willing to suffer catastrophic losses to achieve their blasphemous goals. I fought at the forefront of the Iron Hand's advance, my weapons reaping a terrible toll among the traitor forces. During the height of the battle, as I crushed the skull of a word-bearer champion beneath my power fist, something strange occurred. For a brief moment, reality seemed to shift. I was still fighting, still killing the enemies of the Imperium, but the battlefield had changed. Instead of the burned-out hive city where we had deployed, I found myself on a black glass plain beneath a burning sky. And the enemies I faced were not word-bearers in crimson armor, but lunar wolves, their white plates stained with the blood of loyal warriors. The vision, if that is what it was, lasted only seconds before the familiar reality of the current battle reasserted itself. But it left me shaken, disturbed by its vivid intensity. This was no data ghost, no fragmentary memory surfacing during combat. This had felt like a direct experience, as if for those brief moments I had been physically present during the Horus Heresy itself. When the campaign concluded and we returned to the strike cruiser, I requested an audience with the chapter's librarian who had accompanied the expedition. To my surprise, the request was granted. Epistolary Varro came to the repair bay where I was being prepared for suspension, dismissing the tech marines with a gesture. "Venerable brother," he said once we were alone, "I am told you wish to consult with me on a matter of some delicacy." "I have experienced anomalies during combat," I replied. "Visions of battles I could not have fought. Memories that cannot be my own." The librarian studied me, his psychically attuned mind perhaps sensing more than my words conveyed. "Describe these experiences." I told him of the vision during the battle against the word-bearers, of the memory of Ferrus Manus that had surfaced during my conversation with Techmarine Dagon, of other, smaller moments when my perception had briefly shifted to unfamiliar settings and situations. "Fascinating," Varro said when I had finished, "and concerning. Such temporal displacement is rare but not unprecedented among the Resigned. Chapter's oldest dreadnoughts, the librarium keeps records of similar cases. What is the cause? There are several theories. Some believe it is a form of psychic resonance, particularly in dreadnoughts who have seen combat against warp entities. Others suggest it may be a side effect of certain archaeotech components used in the oldest sarcophagi." He paused. "And then there is the matter of the soul." "Explain." "The Imperium teaches that each human possesses a soul, an immortal essence that returns to the Emperor upon death. But what of those who, like you, exist in a state between life and death? Perhaps your soul, untethered from a complete physical form, occasionally slips through the cracks in reality, experiencing moments from other times and places." It was a disturbing thought, that my very soul might be adrift, unstable, vulnerable to forces I could neither comprehend nor resist. "Is there a remedy?" I asked. Varro shook his head. None that I know of. The chapter's solution has typically been to limit the active periods of affected dreadnoughts, to minimize the risk of complications. You mean madness? That is one potential outcome, yes. Another is cognitive dissolution, where the original personality fragments replaced by a composite of borrowed memories and experiences. And if that occurs, then the dreadnought is typically considered to have fulfilled its service, final rites are performed, and the machine is decommissioned. Decommissioned, a clinical term for what would essentially be execution. The final death that had been denied me when I was interred in the sarcophagus centuries ago. I see, I said, and how close am I to this? Decommissioning. Varro studied me again, his psychic senses probing at the edges of my consciousness. I cannot say with certainty. The process varies greatly between individuals. Some dreadnoughts experience these phenomena for centuries before cognitive decline becomes significant. Others deteriorate more rapidly. And the decision? Who determines when a dreadnought has reached this point? Traditionally, it would be a council of tech marines, apothecaries, and librarians who make such assessments. But in recent centuries, the Iron Council has assumed direct authority over all such matters. The Iron Council, the chapter's ruling body, comprised of the most senior and most heavily augmented Iron Hands. Warriors who had embraced the philosophy of mechanical superiority to such an extent that many had willingly replaced healthy organs and limbs with bionics. I had never stood before them in my current form, but I knew of their reputation for cold logic and unsentimental decision-making. I understand, I said. Thank you for your candor, epistolary. There is one more thing, Ancient One. Varro hesitated, seemingly weighing his next words carefully. There are those within the chapter who believe these temporal displacements are not random, that they serve a purpose, that through them, wisdom from the chapter's past may be preserved when it might otherwise be lost. You speak of Techmarine Dagon's faction. Varro's expression remained carefully neutral. I speak only of theoretical possibilities. But should you experience further significant displacements, it might be beneficial to record them. For the chapter archives, of course. With that cryptic suggestion, he departed, leaving me to contemplate what I had learned as the Techmarines returned to complete my preparation for suspension. The darkness claimed me once more, but this time it was not the complete void I had grown accustomed to. Instead, my consciousness drifted through fragments of memory, some clearly my own, others belonging to experiences I had never had. I saw battles on worlds I had never visited, against enemies from eras long past. I heard the voices of Iron Hands speaking in dialects that had not been used for millennia, and sometimes, briefly, I glimpsed a giant with silver hands, addressing warriors who looked up at him with genuine devotion rather than cold respect. My next awakening came without warning. There was no gradual reactivation of systems, no careful preparation by Techmarines. Instead, my consciousness slammed back into full awareness with jarring suddenness. Warning runes flashed across my vision. Emergency systems activated automatically. My weapons powered up without the usual blessing rituals. I was in a storage vault deep within what I recognized as a chapter fortress monastery. Around me lay other dreadnoughts in various states of readiness, some fully activated like myself, others still in the process of awakening. Alarms blared through the massive chamber, and the distant thunder of explosions reverberated through the stone floor. A Techmarine I did not recognize hurried toward me, his armor scorched and damaged. "Venerable brothers," he addressed the assembled dreadnoughts, "the fortress is under attack. Iron Council instructions are to deploy all available assets in defense of the inner sanctum." "What enemy do we face?" demanded one of the other dreadnoughts, an ancient contemptor pattern whose decorations suggested he had served even longer than I. "Word-bearers," replied the Techmarine. "A massive force led by the Dark Apostle Marduk." The name struck me like a physical blow. Marduk the Faithless. The traitor who had dealt me my mortal wound on Tyrannus 7, whom I had killed with my power fist before succumbing to my injuries. How could he be leading an attack now, centuries after I had crushed his skull? Before I could voice this impossibility, another explosion, closer this time, shook the chamber. The tech marine turned toward the massive doors. They approach. Prepare for combat. The chapter relies on your strength. The doors to the vault swung open, and iron hands poured in, taking up defensive positions. Their armor was different from what I remembered, the mark patterns unfamiliar, the augmentations more extensive. But they moved with the disciplined precision I associated with my chapter, preparing for what would clearly be a desperate last stand. An Astartes captain approached, his armor so heavily modified that little of the original ceramite remained visible. Where his helmet should have been, a mechanical skull housing advanced targeting systems gazed out with emotionless efficiency. Ancient ones, he addressed the assembled dreadnoughts. I am Captain Cardan of the 5th Company. Cardan. Another impossible name. The same Cardan I had fought alongside against the Tyranids centuries ago, who had activated my suspension protocols when I was damaged. The enemy has breached our outer defenses, Cardan continued. They have somehow neutralized many of our more advanced systems. We fight now with limited augmetic support, relying on more primitive weapons and technologies. An electromagnetic pulse weapon, suggested one of the dreadnoughts. No, something worse. A techno-heresy that corrupts machine spirits directly. Many of our battle brothers have been affected, their augmetics turning against them or failing catastrophically. I processed this information with growing unease. A weapon that corrupted machine spirits would be particularly devastating against the Iron Hands, who relied so heavily on technology. But more concerning were the impossible coincidences. Marduk, who should be dead by my hand. Cardan, who should have lived and died centuries ago. Captain, I said, identify this fortress and the current date according to the imperial calendar. Cardan looked at me, his augmetic eyes whirring as they focused. This is the fortress of Medusa's gaze on Medusa, the chapter homeworld. The date is 987, M41, 987, M41. Nearly 2,000 years after my interment in the Dreadnought sarcophagus. Far later than any date I remembered from my fractured experiences of awakening and battle. Before I could question further, the chamber shook with the most violent explosion yet. Part of the ceiling collapsed, crushing several iron hands beneath massive stone blocks. Through the gap poured corrupted servitors and tech thralls, their bodies twisted by the influence of chaos, followed by word-bearers in crimson armor decorated with blasphemous symbols. Battle was joined immediately. The dreadnoughts advanced to the forefront, our massive weapons cutting down waves of enemies. I fought with mechanical precision, centuries of warfare having honed my skills to a deadly edge. But as the battle progressed, I found my perception shifting once again. The vault around me flickered, replaced momentarily by a different battlefield, a great plain of black glass, the same vision I had experienced during my last awakening. This time, however, it did not pass quickly. Instead, the two realities seemed to overlap, creating a disorienting double image. I was fighting word-bearers in the chapter vault and simultaneously battling lunar wolves on that nightmarish plain. The sensations were so vivid, so immediate, that I struggled to determine which was real and which was hallucination. A voice cut through my confusion, not from an external vox, but seemingly from within my own consciousness. The loop tightens. It said, the pattern becomes clear. I recognized the voice, though I had never heard it before. It belonged to the silver-handed giant I had glimpsed in my displaced memories. Ferrus Manus himself, somehow speaking directly to my mind. What is happening to me? I demanded, even as I continued to fight in both realities simultaneously. Time is not as linear as mortals perceive it, the voice replied. For some, particularly those who exist in states between life and death, the boundaries between moments can become permeable. Am I going mad? No. You are remembering, and in remembering, you may break the cycle. Before I could question this cryptic statement, a word-bearer champion broke through the defensive line, heading directly for me. He carried an axe that screamed with the voices of all it had killed. Marduk the Faithless, somehow alive and unchanged after all these centuries. As he charged toward me, reality shifted again. The vault disappeared entirely, replaced by the ashen plains of Tyrannus VII. I was no longer in a dreadnought but in Terminator armor, leading my company against the word-bearer's corrupted cathedrals. And charging toward me was the same enemy, the same weapon, the same moment that had led to my interment. "You have lived this moment countless times," said the voice of Ferrus Manus. "In dreams, in memories, in moments between awakening and battle. It is the pivot around which your existence turns." "I killed him," I replied, even as I prepared to meet Marduk's charge. "I crushed his skull after he wounded me. And yet he returns. As do you. Locked in an eternal moment, neither of you can escape." The axe swung toward me, just as it had centuries ago. I raised my power fist to parry, to repeat the same defense that had allowed me to kill Marduk even as I suffered my mortal wound. "Break the cycle," urged the voice of the Primarch. "Change the pattern." In that moment of perfect clarity, I understood. This was more than memory, more than temporal displacement. This was a loop in reality itself, a moment that had somehow become trapped in endless repetition. Each time I awakened as a dreadnought, each battle I fought, led inexorably back to this primal scene of my death and rebirth. Instead of parrying the axe as I had countless times before, I stepped into the blow. The screaming blade bit deep into my armor, deeper than it had the first time, severing vital systems and connections to my organic components. Pain flared, white-hot and all-consuming, but in that pain was something I had not felt for centuries, the simple, undeniable reality of being fully present in a single moment. Marduk's expression showed surprise at my unexpected move. Before he could recover, my power fist connected with his chest rather than his head. Instead of killing him, I thrust him away, breaking the pattern that had been established in the original encounter. Reality wavered. Both the ashen plains of Tyrannus VII and the chapter vault on Medusa becoming insubstantial, like parchment thinning to transparency. Through them, I glimpsed other realities, other moments. Battles I had fought as a dreadnought, campaigns I had waged as captain, moments from a life I barely remembered, and deaths I had experienced countless times. "What is this?" I demanded of the Primarch's voice, even as the multiple realities continued to shift and merge around me. "The truth of your existence," came the reply. "You died on Tyrannus VII, Brother Captain Meron, but you did not become a dreadnought. Your injuries were too severe for even that honor. Your gene seed was recovered, your body committed to the flames, and your name recorded in the chapter's rolls of the glorious dead. Then how am I here? How have I experienced centuries of war as a revenant in a sarcophagus? Because part of you could not accept death, could not relinquish duty. Your soul, instead of returning to the Emperor, clung to the chapter, to the war, to the endless cycle of battle and sacrifice that is the lot of every space marine. The realities around me began to stabilize, coalescing into a single scene. I stood on a great plain of glass, but not the battlefield from my previous visions. This was a different place, limitless in all directions, reflecting the stars above like a perfect mirror. And before me stood Ferrus Manus, as he had been in life, his silver hands gleaming in the starlight. "Where am I?" I asked. "A place between," the Primarch replied. "Between life and death, between memory and reality, a reflection of your own fractured perceptions. And you? Are you real, or merely a projection of my damaged mind? Does it matter? I am as real as anything in this realm of liminality, real enough to tell you what you need to know. Which is that you have a choice now, Brother Captain. For centuries, your soul has wandered between moments of war, experiencing fragments of battles fought by iron hands in Dreadnought sarcophagi across time. You have inhabited their perceptions as they have occasionally channeled yours, but this existence is neither life nor honorable death. It is a cage of your own making. I looked down at myself, realizing I now appeared as I had in life. No longer the massive war machine, but the Space Marine captain in Terminator armor, whole and undiminished as I had been before Tyrannus VII. "What choice do you speak of?" I asked. "To continue this fractured existence, flitting between moments of war like a ghost haunting ancient battlefields, or to accept the death you earned honorably in service to the Emperor and allow your soul to finally know peace?" The concept was almost incomprehensible after centuries of war. Peace, an end to the eternal cycle of awakening, battle, and suspension, an end to the half-life I had experienced for so long that I had forgotten any other state of being. "If what you say is true," I said slowly, "then I have not truly lived for centuries. I have been a phantom, experiencing the lives and deaths of other warriors who were interred in dreadnoughts. None of it was real." "It was real to you," Ferrus Manus replied. "The experiences were genuine, even if they were not all your own. Through you, something of those other warriors has been preserved that might otherwise have been lost. Their wisdom, their perspective, their understanding of what the chapter was and what it has become. To what end? If I am merely a ghost, what purpose has this existence served? Perhaps to bring a message from the chapter's past to its present. A reminder of what the Iron Hands once were before the flesh became the enemy rather than merely the weakest part of a warrior's being." I considered his words, reflecting on my experiences across the centuries, the slow change I had witnessed in my chapter, the gradual loss of humanity in favor of cold, mechanical efficiency, my own efforts to remind my brothers of what we fought for, not just against. "And if I choose peace? If I finally accept death? Then your soul will return to the Emperor, as it should have centuries ago. Your long service will end, and you will know the rest you have earned many times over." The prospect was tempting beyond words. To be free of the fractured existence I had endured, to finally complete the journey that had been interrupted on Tyrannus VII. "But before you choose," the Primarch continued, "know that there is value in what you have witnessed, in the understanding you have gained by experiencing the chapter's evolution across millennia. That wisdom need not be lost." He gestured, and the glassy plane rippled. Images appeared in its reflective surface, iron hands from the current era gathered in secret councils. Among them I recognized Techmarine Dagon and Epistolary Varro, along with others who seemed to share their perspective. They were studying ancient texts, discussing philosophies that harkened back to the chapter's origins. "These few remember what the chapter was meant to be," said Ferrus Manus. "They seek to balance the pursuit of strength with the preservation of humanity. To honor my memory not by rejecting flesh entirely, but by using technology to overcome its limitations while retaining what makes them human. And you believe my experiences could aid them. I believe that wisdom from the past can illuminate the path forward, that your unique perspective, spanning centuries and multiple lifetimes, contains insights they cannot gain elsewhere." I understood then the choice that truly lay before me, not simply between continued existence and final peace, but between allowing my accumulated wisdom to disperse with my soul, or finding some way to preserve it for those who might use it well. "How?" I asked. "If I am merely a phantom, how can I communicate with the living?" "The same way you have experienced fragments of their existence, through the thin places where the veil between life and death, between past and present, grows permeable. Through dreams, through moments of battle clarity, through the ancient machinery of dreadnought sarcophagi that house souls in states between life and death. Is that enough? Fragments and whispers easily dismissed as malfunction or delusion." Ferrus Manus smiled, a rare expression on his typically stern features. "Sometimes a whisper in the right ear at the right moment can change the course of history, and you will not be alone in this effort. There are others like you. echoes of warriors whose souls linger close to their chapter, seeking to guide and protect even after death. The choice crystallized before me. I could accept final death, returning my soul to the Emperor and finding the peace that had eluded me for centuries. Or I could remain in this liminal state, sacrificing my own rest to preserve and transmit the wisdom I had gained, to help guide the chapter back toward a more balanced path. It was, in the end, no choice at all for one who had lived his entire existence in service. "I will remain," I said, "for as long as my guidance might serve some purpose." Ferrus Manus nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "A final sacrifice worthy of the Iron Hands. But know this, Brother Captain Merron, this choice is not irrevocable. When you believe your purpose is fulfilled, when you have imparted what wisdom you can, the path to peace will remain open to you." "I understand." "Then return. Not to a single time or place, but to the spaces between moments. To the dreams of your brothers who still live. To the memories of the honored dead. To the quiet hours when ancient dreadnoughts stand in silent vigil, their machine spirits receptive to whispers from beyond." The glassy plain began to dissolve around me. Ferrus Manus faded like mist in morning sunlight. As reality shifted once more, his final words reached me through the gathering darkness. "The flesh may be weak, Brother Captain, but the spirit endures. In that truth lies the real strength of the Iron Hands." Then I was adrift again, moving between moments like a ghost between worlds. But now I moved with purpose rather than confusion. I sought out the dreamers, the questioners, those who maintained some spark of humanity beneath their mechanical enhancements. I whispered to them of the chapter's origins, of the balance between flesh and iron that Ferrus Manus had truly embodied, of the brotherhood that had once been as important as strength. Sometimes my whispers went unheeded, lost in the cold logic that dominated the modern chapter. But sometimes they found purchase in minds prepared to receive them, in Tecmarine Dagon's careful preservation of ancient traditions, in epistolary Varro's protection of warriors who questioned the chapter's path, in the actions of young Iron Hands who risked censure to save civilian lives or honor the sacrifices of mortal allies. Small changes, subtle shifts in doctrine and practice, a gradual return to perspectives long abandoned. It would take centuries more for the chapter to fully rediscover its humanity. Perhaps it never would entirely, but even small steps in the right direction held value. And in my moments of doubt, when I questioned whether my continued existence in this liminal state served any purpose, I would return to the glassy plain, not to speak with Ferrus Manus again, for he appeared to me only that once, but to contemplate the stars reflected in its perfect surface, to remind myself that even the smallest light can be seen across unimaginable distances, and that wisdom, once gained, is never truly lost. This, then, is what it means to live forever inside a Space Marine dreadnought, not the physical reality of an enhanced warrior, interred in a walking sarcophagus. That existence, though grim, has its own purpose and honor. No, this is the experience of one whose soul could not let go, who lingered between life and death, witnessing the slow evolution of his chapter across millennia. It is to exist between moments, between heartbeats of history, to watch brothers live and die in what seems like an instant from my perspective, to see enemies rise and fall like waves against an adamantine shore, to witness the slow drift of the chapter away from its origins, and to work patiently, persistently, to guide it back. It is a strange immortality, neither the blissful eternity promised by imperial creed, nor the final peace of oblivion. It is purpose without end, duty beyond death, service that transcends the limitations of flesh and even of time itself. And perhaps, when that purpose is finally fulfilled, when my wisdom has been imparted and my duty completed, I will at last know the peace that has eluded me for so long. My soul will return to the Emperor, and I will take my place among the honored dead of the chapter. My long watch finally ended. Until then, I remain, a whisper in the darkness, a memory of what once was and what might be again. a guardian of ancient wisdom in an age that has forgotten much of value in its relentless march forward. I am Brother Captain Meron of the Iron Hands, and though my flesh died centuries ago on a battlefield of ash, my duty continues, for the Emperor, for humanity, for the soul of the chapter, forever.